one of the books that A.T. Still got from his father, John Wesley, said, look, when you go to an area, for instance, Calgary, this is completely new to me. When you go to an area, you ask the locals what their diseases are and what their treatments are. And so this is what A.T. Still, looked at in the form of medicine, was what were the plants and the therapies. And it even helped him with osteopathy. He was actually looking at the bone setting that all ancient cultures do, and the Shawnee did this too. Their method for bone setting, though, was a little rough. They would actually, if you had a dislocated hip, you would basically be straddling a stump. They would get a small pony or horse and tie your leg to the tail, and then basically they'd whip the horse to go forward with your leg and hopefully pull it back into place. And A.T. Still said sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't work at all. It made everything worse. But he saw the first hip setting from the Shawnee Indians. He was able to do it without the horse. Made him a lot more popular with people. And so those were some of the first adjustments that he was making, was in issues of hip placement and joint issues. So one of the things also about Dr. Still you'll find is that money wasn't a motivator. When his father comes to Missouri, his mentor from the church says, oh, by the way, I've got this opportunity. If you will loan me some of your money, and they only had so much to get settled in, they had $900, and if you'll loan me so much, in 4 months I will give it back to you with interest. It was an opportunity, and $900 was a crazy amount of money. And so they loaned the money, but they never got it back, actually for almost 9 years. And so the family was pretty destitute. They had enough to buy a cow, a couple of horses, and just basically the most meager stocks, and they had to buy the land and the home. So they really had nothing. So they had to live off the land, which is great, because that's where A.T. Still started studying nature, because you literally had to survive. You had to have the edge. And so this is where, when he would hunt, he would investigate the fascia, the muscles, the nerves. But Dr. Still was used this education to see how things work naturally. And that's what brought him to that realization that medicine of the day, which was bleeding, they just cut you and bleed. Now, it's not bad for you. I know friends that give blood every 2 months, and they're fairly healthy. But it doesn't help you any. As a matter of fact, George Washington, our first president, was bled to death for something like strep throat. So burning, where they cup you and they basically heat up a piece of glass and burn you, and then pop the blister claiming the watery fluid is poison. Oddly enough, when I was in Vietnam, a lot of the students, they still do this cupping in Vietnam. And they would look like they were black and blue by the time they were done. They didn't take it to the extent of a blister, but I could not believe that some of the medical students have got themselves cupped, which the Vietnamese still do. It really doesn't do anything. It just makes your system kind of go into shock, and you get this euphoric high because your body's thinking, my gosh, this is dangerous. And so cupping, where they burn you, bleeding, and then just dosing you with mercury, trying to basically kill the disease, which usually killed the patient. Because A.T. Still's father was well educated as a medical doctor, but now was in this rural area, how was he going to support the education of his kids? So this is how A.T. Still got his education. They'd find the smartest businessman, the smartest cattleman. They would apprentice. In the morning, you go to their house. You do chores. Then you come back to our house and you do your work at our house. And at night, you go back to their house and they give you access to books and they teach you. So really, Dr. Still was under a form of apprentice most of his life with some of the greatest minds in the books. So that's how he got educated on the prairie, because it typically wasn't much of an education. But his father made sure they got a good education. So the first actual treatment of osteopathy, A.T. Still said I was about 10 years old and had a severe headache. And we believe Dr. Still's headaches may come from the fact that his cranium, his skull, is actually asymmetrical. There literally are bulges and misshapen. And you can see it in pictures. Actually, if you look at the picture of his glasses, when he wears his glasses, one arm of the glasses sits on the ear. The other just goes up the side of his head. It doesn't even go anywhere near the ear. So there was something obviously going on with his cranium. And so Dr. Still had these severe headaches that would make him sick to the stomach. And he just got so everything hurt. So he said the only place that didn't really hurt was the back of my neck and back of my skull. So he created with a rope a sling. And later he turned that into, and some of you have seen, and you're welcome to come up and look at that museum pieces. But he said if you bring a rope 6 inches off the ground, and then you have it at a tilt, and it sits at the base of the neck, after about 10-15 minutes, you start to feel better, and within an hour, your headache will completely go away. It may reestablish, readjust the blood flow. It could also at the same time be stretching. If there's a tension headache, stretching slowly the muscles naturally with your own weight. So there's a variety of things that could be going on. But we know Dr. Still used those his entire life. Because in a picture of him, when he's about 86 years old, on his treatment table, which he started just sleeping on, he, and there's how he said, just a rope with a blanket. And that angle was very important. But it would be just like having someone's hands behind your head lifting. And so we see two different styles of what he calls a saint's rest. He also called it an angel's hand. So you know what saint's rest means. It was as if a deity was, holding your head. And the clue was when he called it saints or angels' hands rest. And I've used this when I fly. I don't get migraine headaches, but I do fly, and I get really congested because of it. And it just completely opens everything up in about 15 minutes. Kind of interesting. And so if we look at Dr. Still, he's wearing the little hat that I brought. But here on the table is one of these slings on a piece of wood. And so used him all of his life. Obviously never got rid of the migraine. He could treat it, he just couldn't get rid of them permanently. So he says another thing is one day I was just so achy and nothing felt right and just couldn't get my act together. And he said, I noticed that my dad had a log sitting in the yard. And I just was so desperate, I just literally just threw myself on it because everything was aching. And when I hit, something kind of moved. And all of a sudden I could feel the flow as if the blood had been released. And I got better very quickly. And so again, these early experimentations, he didn't know they were osteopathy, but as an adult he went back and looked and said, I was actually adjusting the blood flow, I was stretching the muscles, I was doing things. But I was, as a kid, just trying to get healthy. And as I mentioned from the Shawnee Indians in the lecture, talking about that, maybe the legs come off, maybe the hips get set. Frontier surgery with a vengeance is using the pony. But he was actually able to set hips indoors and stuff like that. That's one of the most prominent things he did when he first started out. We have the tombstone of his wife Mary and his children. That also kind of pioneered him on to figure out osteopathy. He lost his first wife in 1859. She never wanted to travel out to the Shawnee. She didn't have a lot of friend base. She lost a child at birth. It was very difficult. She had lost another child. And at this point in her life, A.T. still is working with his hands. They thought he was emulating Jesus. As we know from the Bible, Jesus would lay his hands on people and miracle cures would happen. Well, it seemed like when someone's hip was dislocated, A.T. still would lay his hands on them and they'd be, hallelujah, I'm cured. But the church saw this as, well, the devil can do what Jesus can do, that we know you're not Jesus. So the only alternative is you must be some form of faker like the devil. And so he was basically called out in church for his new techniques of healing. And it really, what little bit of community his wife had was now going to be shut down. Now A.T. still said, my dad founded the church in this area. We've been here forever. You're not going to basically disassociate me from the church. He really didn't care. But his wife took it very seriously, became depressed, stopped eating, and lost another child in birth, and basically gave up. And by the time he realized the track that she was on, it was too late to save her.